what the evidence shows being discussed behind the scenes and being offered to Ron Paul if he plays ball and doesn't run third party. I think they'll betray Ron Paul. Let me just say, I think this is all a bad idea. My gut tells me that. But I know why the Paul campaign is looking at all options, and they clearly are. Does that mean Ron Paul is going to go with the bad idea? No. But it means some of the people below him who are younger and don't have his wisdom are certainly chomping at the bit at this. Because they get to go on. They get to be in the vice president's office if you're Jesse Benton, if you're Rachel Mills, if you're these people. You get to be in the White House. So what are you going to advise Ron Paul on? And I know he's wise enough to still take counsel to bounce ideas around. But they think it's enough of a discussion. Not Mills, I just use her as an example. Benton does, to have said things like this repeatedly about Rand Paul. And maybe that is a step up. Maybe Benton's right. I'm just stating all angles here because I can tell you that's what's going on in their brains. This isn't, oh my gosh, Ron Paul's bad. Some people are discussing him running as VP when he hasn't done that. It's some of his people have when asked over and over again. Was it out of turn? Is it wrong? We don't know. We'll ask Ron Paul next time he's on with us. You better believe it. I've put my cards on the table. Lou, what do you say about what I've said, and what's your gut on this, and what's the inside baseball on this subject? Because I haven't been able to get Ron on the last month or so.
Well, Alex, remember, I'm not a spokesman for Ron or for the campaign, so I'm just giving you my own view. But I think it's all a trick. It's just another establishment trick to make it look like Ron Paul is a sellout like all the rest of them. Ron Paul has never sold out. Ron Paul will never sell out. And so this has two pieces. As you said, to bring down Ron Paul to make him seem like he's just one of the regular criminal bunch. And the other is to make Ron Paul supporters like Romney. Well, if he's willing to consider Ron Paul as a VP, Romney must be a pretty good guy. Well, because Romney, exactly like Gingrich and Santorum, even though Romney's a more pleasant person, and I'm sure his wife is a nice person, his kids are nice, and all those kinds of questions. But really, he's, as you say, he's a globalist. He's a big government guy. He believes in corporatism and fascism and the partnership between big government and big business. He's a warmonger. He's an imperialist. He's a protectionist. He's a big government guy, big spender, bail out the banks. I mean, he's bad on virtually everything. I guess, he was against the bailout of GM. But my guess is if he were president, he would have done it, and he would have made a lot of money out of it, because that's the kind of guy he is. He makes a lot of money out of government projects. So, no, I think this is just another trick, and they would never let Ron Paul be vice president. Ron Paul has a chance, we all hope and pray, to push his way into office by the people putting him there. However, the idea that the regime would invite him into office is just science fiction.
Document proves DHS is monitoring social media for government criticism. INFOWARS.com. A Homeland Security training manual belies claims made by DHS representatives during a congressional hearing last week that the federal agency is only monitoring social media outlets for, quote, situational awareness, and proves the fact that Big Sis is also tracking online criticism of government, including discussion of airport body scanners. And yet again, the Department of Homeland Security has been caught lying to the American people. Would you believe it? Despite the release that we had a couple of weeks ago now of 300 documents that showed how the federal agency was monitoring Twitter and Facebook for comments critical of government and the operations of the DHS. We saw its representatives last week go before a congressional hearing and brazenly lie in claiming that the DHS was only interested in monitoring and tracking information about banal things like extreme weather events. They said that's the only thing they were interested in. They were interested in situational awareness. Turns out to be total BS. To explain it, this document was released as a result of a Freedom of Information Act request to EPIC, Electronic Privacy Information Center. And it's basically a training manual which tells DHS analysts what keywords to search for when they're trawling and monitoring social media networks. And as I said, during last week's hearing, we had Mary Callahan, this DHS representative, claiming that these keywords they were searching for were restricted to, quote, flood, tornado, and things like that. That's what they said they were interested in. But in reality, the manual also directs DHS analysts to search for terms such as, quote, China, cops, hacking, illegal immigrants, Iran, Iraq, marijuana, organized crime, police, pork, and radicals. Also the words, quote, militia, riot, body scanner, and nationalist were also included in the list of keywords that the DHS is tasked with monitoring. So not only are they tracking criticism of government, which came out in the original 300 document leak, they're even tracking not only other federal agencies, but agencies and organizations outside of the US government, such as the UN and the Red Cross. And they're also tracking what people are saying about naked body scanners in airports. So again, their testimony last week has been proven to be a complete lie. They are tracking government criticism. They are tracking individual trends, including the backlash against airport body scanners. And it all boils down to the effort to create this chilling effect, this atmosphere where people are afraid to express their First Amendment for fear of, you know, some little DHS spy is going to be recording and cataloguing their dissent, which is all the more reason, of course, to increase your dissent exponentially, shove it back in their face, and proudly assert your right to freedom of speech by engaging in increased vitriolic criticism of the DHS, because we certainly know it deserves it. Coming up now, we're going to throw to this interview with Flight 253 passenger and eyewitness Kurt Haskell. Of course, he was the eyewitness to the manufactured underwear bomber attack, and Rob Dew travelled to Michigan to get part 2 of this interview, which focuses on the aftermath of what he witnessed and the government cover-up relating to the underwear bomber incident. So let's go to that clip now.
An intelligence agency gave Abdul Muttalib an intentionally defective bomb and put him on the plane to stage a fake terrorist attack.
Continuing now with our breaking news coverage, new facts on the table tonight about just how hard the father of the alleged Christmas bomber tried to warn U.S. intelligence about his son.
One thing I'd like to point out is that the system worked.
The mainstream media, anyway, is nothing but a fourth branch of the government. Whatever the government says, the media reports. They don't question it. They just accept whatever the government says is fact. And I really found that out during this case. I didn't know anything about that before this, but I would see it firsthand where different reporters would interview me and they would think I had something important to say, only to figure out that their higher-ups would, not let them report the story, and then I would talk to them and wouldn't appear in the press anywhere. This happened many times with me in the Free Press. I did 3-4 interviews with them, and they would never, ever report anything on me. It got to be just, I'd see the Free Press reporter at a court hearing, and I'd be like, hey, are you ever going to report anything on me? No, but I still have all my notes on the case, would be the response, and I'd be like, okay, we'll talk next time, I guess. Okay. That kind of thing. Up until they were forced to cover me right before the trial happened, then the media was kind of forced to talk about me because I was named as the only witness for the defense. So, you will see the media talking about me if you go back to October, but from, say, January 2010 until October 2011, you'll see basically nothing of me in the mainstream media except for 2 Fox News interviews that I did in January 2011, which I was very shocked that they aired. Fox News local here in Detroit actually did an interview with me outside the courthouse in January 2011. I had about 10 reporters, or maybe 10 to 20 reporters standing by me, and I said, look, this is what happened. I know none of you are going to report it, and I told them the story what had happened. I was shocked when Fox News actually did report it on their 5 o'clock news here in Detroit. And then not only that, they came to my office the next day to do a follow-up interview, and I actually aired that on the 5 o'clock news. So,
was the man known as the underwear bomber a pawn in a larger plan by our own government?
We told you about the two local attorneys, both passengers on board that plane on Christmas Day of 2009. They believe the government was behind the scare in the air.
The U.S. government gave Muttalab an intentionally defective bomb.
It's a shocking allegation, but Kurt Haskell remembers seeing Abdul Muttalib at their gate at the airport in Amsterdam. He didn't have a passport, but Haskell says a man with an American accent in a tan suit helped him board anyway.
What he said was, first of all, this man needs to get on the flight and he doesn't have a passport. He's from Sudan. We do this all the time. That's a word-for-word quote.
That was basically the only mainstream media coverage I had from January 2010 through October 2011. Yeah, you know, I went to a lot of the hearings in the case because I found out early on that the media wasn't reporting what was going on at the trial. I would go and see things, and then I'd read the newspaper the next day, and the things I read in the paper wouldn't necessarily be the things that I think they should be reporting on or were reporting on. It was really kind of strange. You know, I went to a hearing, I think it was in July of 2011. That was a hearing to determine whether Anthony Chambers, who by then was appointed standby attorney, remember Abdul Muttalib fired his initial court-appointed attorneys pretty early on. Judge Edmonds then gave him a standby attorney, Anthony Chambers, who was just kind of a helper. Is basically what a standby attorney is. So this hearing was to decide if Anthony Chambers would have access to all the evidence in the case. And I listened to the prosecutors argue, and what they said was, we don't think Anthony Chambers should have the evidence in this case, but only Abdul Muttalib. And the reason they gave was, if we give the evidence to Anthony Chambers, third parties can subpoena it and get the evidence to use it to sue us. Because Anthony Chambers doesn't have the attorney-client privilege, which would shield the giving of the evidence, you know, by any subpoena he would receive, because he's not an attorney on the case, but only a standby attorney. And I thought that was pretty telling. You know, it raised red flags with me. Number one, why does Abdul Muttalib not have a regular attorney? And number two, why is the government concerned about being sued in this case? What had they done to get sued? Maybe put Abdul Muttalib on the plane with an intentionally defective bomb? I don't know, but I thought it was pretty telling. And Judge Edmonds decided, well, I'm only going to give the evidence to the defendant, Abdul Muttalib, and then he'll have to decide what Chambers gets, if anything, from there. So the government won that hearing, and it was just kind of pretty telling, to me anyway, and that didn't get reported in the media as I thought it should either. No mention of the government being sued or anything like that. And another hearing I went to was, again, in I believe it was mid-2011 or so, and Anthony Chambers at this hearing requested that the trial be delayed. I think it was set for early October, so there was maybe 3 more months until the trial started. And what Anthony Chambers said was, and remember, this is maybe 1.5 years after the incident, he said, look, I've just been dumped all this evidence that I consider the most important evidence in the entire case. And he went and listed it. I've just been given Abdul Muttalib's passport. I've just been given the airport security video, security and audio video. I've just been given the composition of the bomb by the government's so-called experts, and he listed a couple other things too, something about DNA, which I didn't know what exactly he was talking about with that, but I thought it was pretty telling because several of the things he listed tie exactly into what I've been saying all along, that Abdul Muttalib did not have a passport, that he was given a fake bomb, and that he was escorted on the plane without going through security, and that would all tie into that. And the reason I thought it was important was because the government withheld this evidence for almost 1.5 years, giving Chambers the least amount of time to look at it, the least amount of time to hire experts to testify for the defense and have them look at it, which is a common tactic of lawyers that want to play games in a case. You hide evidence and you give it at the last possible minute, because if you hide it entirely and don't give it to the other side, well, then that can change the outcome of the case entirely due to hidden evidence. But